Hello to everyone around the world and welcome to the 2022 Stand With Us International Israel in Focus Conference virtual style. I'm your conference MC, Michael Dixon, Executive Director of Stand With Us Israel, and we're coming to you right from the heart of Israel's capital. I'd like to begin by thanking our sponsors, the Gila and Adam Milstein Family Foundation, without which this conference would not be possible. Thank you, Adam and Gila, for helping us educate thousands of people every single year through the work and impact of this important event. For those of you who've joined us in person before, you know that we usually host this conference in Los Angeles with hundreds of participants of all ages, faiths, and backgrounds who join together from around the world to learn from experts, discuss the challenges of anti-Semitism, and explore opportunities to educate about Israel over an entire weekend. Well, the world has changed quite a bit these past 2 years, but Stand With Us didn't miss a beat in shifting to virtual and hybrid education and engagement as we are today. We've been working diligently throughout the pandemic to bring you our programming online through amazing new platforms like Stand With Us TV, Zionist Movie Club, virtual tours to Israel, our live hybrid Festival of Lights Gala, our growing library of materials available online at no cost and in multiple languages, Connect Teen, digital conferences, and so much more. And this year, in addition to students from North America, the UK, and Brazil, we're joined for the first time by students from Germany, Mexico, the Netherlands, and South Africa. So thank you all for joining us today to learn and share together. We'll soon hear from incredible speakers such as historian Gil Troy, former white supremacist T.M. Garrett, Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem Fleur Hassan Nahum, communications expert Neil Lazarus, and many, many more. So welcome to our plenary, which will be followed by breakout sessions, and then we'll join back together for a closing plenary. It's sure to be an educational and inspirational day. Thank you for being here. Thank you in advance for your participation. Thank you for taking a stand against anti-Semitism, and thank you for standing with us. Now, to open the conference for us, we have a message from Executive Director of Stand With Us Campus Affairs, Rena Nasser First, and Executive Director of Stand With Us High School Affairs, Liz Tsai. But first, a word from Stand With Us CEO and co-founder, Roz Rothstein.
Welcome to the 2022 Stand With Us Israel in Focus International Conference. As we open this conference, we are all keenly aware of the life-threatening hostage crisis that took place last week at Beth Israel Synagogue near Dallas, Texas. Malik Faisal Akram was invited to enter the synagogue because he appeared to be in need of shelter, but then he turned on his Jewish hosts, taking them hostage in a terrorist attack that lasted 11 frightening hours. In response, many have chosen to focus on the issue of mental illness. While we still don't have all the facts, it is certainly possible that mental health played a role in Akram's actions. Yet it is also a fact that he targeted Jews and had anti-Semitic ideas, and we cannot allow that reality to be swept under the rug. Akram was not born with hate. Nobody is. Hate is taught. He was poisoned with a very specific anti-Semitic ideology promoted by extremists in the Muslim world and beyond. This includes conspiracy theories like Jews controlling world governments. Akram really believed that Jews are so powerful that they could get Afia Siddiqui, a terrorist convicted for attempted murder, out of a Texas prison. It should surprise no one that Siddiqui promoted similar hate and conspiracy theories against Jews during her trial. We are all so grateful that the hostages were able to escape and that the FBI and law enforcement handled the situation so carefully. We also deeply appreciate the support of other communities, including Christians and Muslims, who stood with Congregation Beth Israel and spoke out strongly against anti-Semitism. It should be blatantly obvious that this was an attack against Jewish people at a Jewish house of worship on the Jewish holy day of Shabbat. It was a violent attack of anti-Semitism that demonstrates why Jewish institutions need increased security, including training for possible threatening situations. It should also be crystal clear that the world needs a better understanding of what anti-Semitism is so that we can all identify and fight it when we see it. We cannot hope to defeat it if we cannot define it. All of us attending this conference have an opportunity today to become better educators about the issue of anti-Semitism. Today, that will be one of our many goals, to make you better equipped to have important conversations about all forms of anti-Semitism across the political spectrum, to help you identify when rhetoric or conversations about Israel cross the line into bigotry against Jews. We need not be afraid, we need to be proud, but we need to be vigilant. Each one of you has a story, your own personal history that brought you to join us this weekend. Part of my background is that I am a daughter of Holocaust survivors. Let me quickly tell you a short story that makes my personal history what it is. Before the Holocaust, young Jews your age were making their way across Europe to get to boats that would take them to Palestine because they believed in the dream of Jewish self-determination in our ancestral homeland, and they believed in the rebirth of Israel. And they made their way from European city to European city, and my grandparents' home was a stopping place, a refuge for food and rest. My mother saw this as a small child and never forgot it. It became part of her inspiration and her story. So it became part of mine, just hearing it. I grew up believing that Israel, the only Jewish country in the world, should be celebrated, treasured, and guarded with care and personal involvement. I also grew up knowing that each one of us that cares about Israel has a responsibility to teach others about Israel's challenges as well as Israel's gifts to the world. So we created this incredible organization to help us do just that. Thanks to the support of Gila and Adam Milstein, we've been having this conference every year for nearly 20 years. As we launch what will be truly a transformative day, we will focus on overcoming our challenges and embracing our opportunities.
I'm excited to welcome over 200 university students from all over the world who are with us today. It's nice to see some familiar faces like our Stand With Us Emerson Fellows and participants of our first year Leadership Institute. But if you're new to Stand With Us, welcome to the family. You will get out of this conference whatever you put in. So make sure to take advantage of every opportunity available to learn, grow, and connect.
And I'm excited to welcome over 200 high school students from all over North America. Welcome to our Stand With Us Kenneth Leventhal High School interns, to our Teen Leadership Council members, and to all of our high school student leaders. We are so excited to have you all with us for an inspiring and educational day. And back to you, Michael.
Thanks, Roz, Rena, and Liz for the incredible work you do day in and day out to help our students and communities around the world support Israel and stand against anti-Semitism. Next up, we'll hear from a man who is the definition of transformation, and he should give every single one of us hope. He's a former neo-Nazi and KKK leader who'll discuss his journey from being a white supremacist to becoming a peace activist. T.M. Garrett.
Thank you, Michael. I really think that Stand With Us is doing so important work, and so I didn't hesitate long when I was asked to be a speaker at the 2022 annual Stand With Us International Conference. This year, due to known reasons, unfortunately only virtually. I'm not sure if you have looked me up before the conference, but I'm not the usual speaker you would expect for a conference like this. And I'm gonna tell you why. Today, I'm a human rights activist who's working with numerous groups in the Black and Jewish community. I'm also the director of an organization that helps individuals leave extremist groups, such as hate groups. And I'm also an extremism researcher at the International Center for the Study of Violent Extremism. So you could say my business is for the love of people, but it hasn't always been like that. Until about 20 years ago, my business was hating people. I was a neo-Nazi, anti-Semite, a racist, and a Holocaust denier. Wait, what? Yes, you heard right. But isn't that quite a change? And many ask, can people change that drastically? And if so, how is it possible? And what does it take? So many of us have seen friends and neighbors become conspiracy theorists in the last years and wonder how normal people can seemingly overnight turn into paranoid actors who are expecting a world conspiracy behind everything. But make no mistake, people who are going this way are neither stupid nor born as violent extremists, and they also didn't change overnight. Just as people who are trapped in extremist organizations, cults, or hate groups are also not simply changing overnight back. I know what I'm talking about. I was one of them. Now, I was actually worse. But let's do a little time traveling to get to the bottom of this, so bear with me. I was born in a little conservative German town in 1975. And when I say little, I mean little. Like 500 citizens. My family just had moved there, and they were full of problems. There were Catholics in a predominantly Protestant town. There were the newbies that had a different dialect. They had a heavy drinking problem. And just around the time when I was born, they divorced. And we're talking about 1975. That was a no-go back then. So my family were the outsiders, and that also carried over to me as well as a child. So my mom just tried to raise me and get me through school. She always provided material things, but I didn't know who I was, why I was the unplanned child, or why I wasn't a priority somehow. I was the kid with fancy clothes, while the others were polo shirts and jeans. I had that weird haircut and those glasses you get bullied for, and yes, I was bullied a lot. I was a perfect victim for bullies. My mom, she meant well, but how little did I know that she was fighting her own demons. But then again, how would I fit in this world? So I was the bullied kid that he could push around, looking for a purpose and identity. I wanted to be somebody so bad. And then just around the time when boys are discovering their masculinity, like the age of 13, we learned about World War II, Hitler, the Nazis, and the Holocaust in school. Some of the older kids were cracking Hitler jokes, racist, Islamophobic, and anti-Semitic jokes, and I picked them up too. I was good at telling jokes, so it brought me some of the wanted attention that I craved for, but it also got me in a lot of trouble. And I always was a little extreme. So I took it to the next level. I made a comic book out of all these jokes, drew them down, and all of a sudden, I was known as the Nazi kid in school. I was put in this box. The kid did something anti-Semitic, so he must be an anti-Semite and a Nazi, right? Looks like it. So they closed the lid of that box and labeled me, and no one seemed to care for the boy inside anymore. They all just cared for the label. I didn't want to wear this label. I was like, I'm sticking out my hand out of this box, crying for help. But all I could see were judging and pointing fingers. But I needed that hand that would help me and pull me out of that box. I felt so misunderstood. I didn't know anything about neo-Nazis or skinheads. I thought the Nazis died in 1946 in Nuremberg. I made fun of Hitler too. How could I be a Nazi? I didn't understand, but no one listened. No one cared about how intentional or unintentional it was what I did. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to play it down. It was clear that I did something that was very racist, Islamophobic, and anti-Semitic. But it wasn't for the intent to hate. I didn't know anything about that all of that. So, but once again, it seemed that no one cared. So I started to pick up more and more attributes of the extremist far right. My identity shifted from the joke teller Nazi kid to the far right proud German. Here comes one of the tricky parts. You have grandparents that are still alive whom you love, but then you're forced to wonder whether they have been involved in any atrocities in World War II, maybe the Holocaust. That's nothing a 13-year-old wants to be confronted with, nor even would understand. It's tricky. Then another kid in school gave me a cassette tape with hate music. You know, the softcore version that'll lure me in. That's how recruiters of extremist groups always work. They feed you with something that would resonate with you and then gradually raise that level. And I always loved music, so I was hooked. But with every cassette tape, that music, the lyric got more hateful, and slowly I got more hateful too. And it's called mere exposure. You start liking what you see every day, especially when it comes from a supposedly trusted source, and that was trusted to me. Or like Ovid said 2,000 years ago, dripping water hollows out stone, not through force but through persistence. You know, our brains slowly build these neural pathways, and we literally get hardwired. And one day I wanted to get to know these people that were singing these lyrics. I found them at a county fair, and the next day I came home with a shaved head. It looked like it happened overnight, but it wasn't. And my journey wasn't over either. You know, it takes a while to walk 10 miles into a forest, and I wasn't nearly there yet. So I joined that group, climbed up the ranks, I got myself a guitar, started writing lyrics, and I recorded albums, traveled all over Europe and the US to play my music and those hateful lyrics. And first it was about the skinhead subculture only. The xenophobic aspect wasn't based on any particular ideology, but merely on fear of losing out and provoking. So it was still more about just getting attention provoking. But when I joined the NPD, a German extremist far-right party with connections to neo-Nazis, they told us that the foreigners are overflowing the country, that the parasites and germs must come first. That's when the ideology kicked in. And they also had a solution for the problem we had with our grandparents. They claimed the Holocaust never happened. Our grandparents weren't criminals committing a genocide, but they were heroes defending our country. Problem solved. And then on the internet, that was 1998, the internet was just exploding. Someone told me to read this book that will explain everything. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And I know, it is what you call today fake news. It was a pamphlet made up in Russia in 1903 by anti-Zionists and anti-Semites to stir hate against Jews. It presented the Jews as an overpowerful force and enemy who's planning to take over the world, and the only thing standing between them and world domination was the white race. Oh, now I understood. This is why Hitler hated the Jews. According to this book, the Jews are all behind everything, all evil in this world. They were the ultimate evil, and we are the good ones. It felt like I found the Holy Grail. And I had the chance to protect myself and my people against this enemy like a superhero. And to be honest, which kid doesn't want to be a superhero? And saving everyone. Sure, give me a cape, of course. So my identity switched again from the provoking skinhead to nationalist and national socialist and Holocaust denier. You see this step-by-step radicalization? Then in 1998, same year, I joined a German faction of the KKK. As before, I climbed up the ladder and became the leader of that European KKK group. And while I was on the top of this career in that movement, you know, I said before, Germany has done a great job after World War II to put its finger on this problem very, very tight. And since we switched to recruit business people and police officers very successfully for membership, the authorities had a very close eye on us. And I remember the intelligence service one time visited me and made clear that if one of my members would commit a violent crime, I would go to prison. That was scary because I realized I'm not in control of them. You know, we were not the hippies preaching peace and love. I got scared, so I made a decision and stepped down from my offices, my leadership, and left the group. Me and my family decided to move to another town to get away from that. And that's a really, really difficult decision because that was something I was afraid of anyway, starting over new. So we're running away. Don't get me wrong, I only got my head out of the hate group. The hate was still in my head though. And I remember when I called that number for the only apartment in the classifieds that we could find. And the guy picked up the phone and he had a very heavy Turkish accent. And he also lived in the house in the apartment downstairs. And I was like, really? The only place available and it's owned by a Turkish Muslim immigrant? So I started lying to myself. It's just temporary. I'll find something else. No, but I didn't. I was stuck, and of course I kept running into the guy all the time. We shared the same hallway, and I really wanted to hate him so bad. But he just kept being nice, showing nothing but that stupid unconditional love. I was still in warrior mode and wanted to fight. I wanted him to hate me back. And I thought love is for hippies. And one day he invited me for dinner. I said yes. That was a big, big step. I guess being around him became sort of normal. And I remember that I expected him to be so mad when he brought the appetizer. I didn't like the appetizer. It was fish soup. I can't stand it. I heard in the culture you better don't reject food. They might be really, really offended. But it wasn't a big deal. And everything was so different than I expected. The entree was chicken and fries. What happened to couscous and falafel? But what, chicken and fries? That's so normal. But who am I to decide what's normal? All of a sudden my hate started to crumble. And I couldn't hate that man. He loved his kids just as I loved mine. He worried about his future just as I worried about mine. He liked good music, a good movie. He liked chicken and fries. The commonalities were just so much more than what I thought, what puts us apart. His nationality and his beliefs became secondary to me. All I saw was just a human being who showed me something I thought I didn't deserve at the time. Compassion and unconditional love. So I needed to find out more. Germany has a big Turkish community, and guess what? When I got to know them, they're just human beings. They all like chicken and fries. Then I moved to Memphis 12 years later in 2012. I discovered the black community, and guess what? They were just like me too, and they also like chicken and fries. And then I discovered the Jewish community, and they also like chicken and fries. Well, sometimes kosher, but they like chicken and fries. I realized we all are not that different. It took me a long time to get rid of all the stereotypes I believed in. Even stereotypes I found normal people believed in. And every time I actually decided to find out and to sit down with said community, I found out that we all have so much more in common and that we're not that different. Let me tell you 2 important stories before I let you go. I remember my first time I attended a service at a synagogue, Erev Yom Kippur 2019. It was a very warm welcome, even though everybody knew who I was. And I wore a kippah and I had a transliteration so I could pray. And after the service, I remember somebody walked up and asked, TM, tell me about anti-Semitism in Germany. And I was so proud that I could tell them. Germany has done a great job making up for it, reflecting, making sure it must never happen again. There's no danger coming anymore from Germans. The next day, I turned on the phone just to find out that a German neo-Nazi had attacked the synagogue in Halle, Germany. And I felt like a liar because of what I have told these people yesterday. And then as I kept thinking, another very uncomfortable feeling came up. If somebody would have violently entered the synagogue to murder everybody inside who was praying, well, I looked like a Jew. I prayed like a Jew. I would have been dead. And for the very first time, I knew how it feels not to feel safe because you're part of a minority group. I felt so numb and helpless. And I didn't have an answer. What I always can bring hope with my story when I talk. I was still trying to find out what we can do when we feel helpless like this. So let me tell you the last story that you can take home, or if you're at home, you can ponder on this tonight, okay? It's a story that gave me the answer. Also to my own story. I remember when I was on a speaking tour just before COVID hit in 2020. I was talking to a small lunch group that was led by a rabbi. And before I spoke, the rabbi had to share a little story because it just had happened a couple of days before that, and it was very timely. And I remember after he was done, I said, I don't need to share my story anymore. You just explained it in a few minutes. It was the story of a young woman, a college student at the University of Michigan, whose mezuzah was stolen. Of course, she realized that it was very intentional and she wondered if she had become a victim of an anti-Semitic attack. So the perpetrator was found, and she decided to sit down with him rather than pressing charges. She sat down. So during the meeting, she asked him if he would take a tour at the Holocaust Museum, and he agreed. And he also compensated her for the stolen mezuzah. So instead of pressing charges, she decided to sit down. What we can learn here is that we all have a great power. Whenever our community, actually any community, is under attack, and we feel numb and helpless, we have the great power to decide what happens to these individuals in those boxes. And that young man who stole the mezuzah was in that box. Everybody thought he was an anti-Semite and a Nazi. And we have two choices. We can either open the box, look at the human being inside, pull the human being out, put him back on track, or we wait until the guys with the swastikas and the white hoods will do it. We will never know, but maybe this student has saved that young man from becoming the next synagogue shooter. This is the great power we have. So you may have realized that I said our community several times, and yes, you heard right. After a long journey looking for an identity and a long journey getting to know Judaism, I'm now in the process to convert to Judaism. Thank you.
What an incredible story of the power that outreach and education can have. Thank you, TM, for your story and your inspiring work as a peace activist. With anti-Semitism rising rapidly around the world, let's get an update on the situation by Director of the Stand With Us Center for Combating Anti-Semitism, Carly Gamble.
Hello, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Carly Gamble, and I'm privileged to serve as the director of the Stand With Us Center for Combating Anti-Semitism, as well as Counsel for Litigation Strategy within the Stand With Us Side Off Legal Department. Before we get started with this informative international session, let's take a quick look at the history of this virulent virus called anti-Semitism.
Brooklyn rabbi was beaten with a brick, shows a suspect approaching the man from behind and then punching him across the head, knocking him to the ground.
I was defending myself. I was fighting for my life.
As you just saw, throughout the history of the Jewish people, anti-Semitism has existed and persisted. So while anti-Semitism is nothing new, we are seeing an alarming rise in anti-Jewish bias and bigotry around the globe, including not only efforts to ostracize and marginalize Jews, but blatant verbal harassment and even physical attacks. In this past year alone, Stand With Us has seen a 400% increase in the number of requests that we've received for assistance with anti-Semitic and anti-Israel incidents. These attacks have taken place on social media, on middle school, high school, and college campuses, and within the broader community. This certainly provides reason for concern. But at Stand With Us, we are vigilant in monitoring and responding to the situation, working to strategically and effectively address this hate whenever and wherever it arises. To provide a look at what is happening and how Stand With Us is addressing anti-Semitism around the globe, we're going to take a quick trip to get updates from Latin America, Europe, Canada, and the United States. Now let's check in with Canadian Parliament member, the Honourable Anthony Housefather, for an update on the situation in Canada. Anthony, thank you so much for being with us. And I wonder if you could tell us just a little bit about what it is you're seeing in terms of anti-Semitism there in Canada, which I understand is similar to what we experience here in the US, and then also how that's being addressed, particularly from a governmental perspective.
Thank you so much for having me, Carly. Yes, anti-Semitism in Canada, when you look at all the different forms of hate, is the one that comes out on an annual basis as the one that is happening the most. But like the United States and Australia, we're lucky that anti-Semitism is generally pretty limited in our society, and it comes from the far right and the far left. And this year, when the Israeli-Gaza conflict happened, we saw an upsurge in anti-Semitism like I've never seen before in my lifetime. For the first time, people were genuinely afraid to wear a kippah in public or take their kids to Jewish areas and Jewish schools, fearing that something might happen. And while that is dissipated, we continue on an ongoing basis to have BDS movements and the Israel apartheid movement on college campuses that make students afraid or fearful to express themselves on campus. I think that is probably the number one constant. The second is on social media, where we see social media providers not enforcing their guidelines in a uniform way, and anti-Semitism, about 85% of anti-Semitism actually originates online, which is why I'm proud to be working with a group of international legislators from the United States, Australia, the UK, and Israel, and Canada on a bipartisan basis to tackle this internationally, and why the government of Canada convened an emergency summit on anti-Semitism this summer. We appointed Erwin Kotler as both our domestic and international envoy to combat anti-Semitism. We passed an anti-BDS motion in Parliament, where both Liberals and Conservatives joined together to condemn the BDS movement and those sponsoring BDS in Canada and abroad. And we are working on education, and we're working on other things, such as going into campuses. Our Prime Minister has gone into campuses a number of times and spoken about why BDS is a new form of anti-Semitism. But we in Canada concur that we still need to attack this legislatively. We're about to adopt legislation to force social media providers to take down hate speech, which would include anti-Semitic speech that crosses the line and incites. And we're going to keep working on this because there's nothing that will stop us from fighting anti-Semitism in Canada at home and abroad.
Thank you so much. These are obviously serious issues that require a strategic response, and we're so grateful to have so many partners and allies in Canada, including those in government positions like yourself, who continue to monitor and respond to the continuing threat of global anti-Semitism. So thank you for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
For an update from the UK, we have with us Natasha Hausdorff. Natasha is a barrister in London and serves as legal director of the UK Lawyers for Israel Charitable Trust. Natasha, we appreciate you taking the time to be with us. And what can you tell us about how anti-Semitism is manifesting there in the UK?
Well, hi, it's great to be with you from London. Carly, in light of the Simon Wiesenthal Centre's recent decision to list the BBC on its global anti-Semitism top 10, placing it third of last year's anti-Semites, it strikes me as perhaps sensible to focus on the latest controversy with which lawyers associated with UK Lawyers for Israel are now involved. If there was ever an incident that demonstrated the nexus between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, it is this attack in Oxford Street, where observant Jews going to celebrate a Jewish festival were attacked by racists using Nazi salutes, anti-Israel slogans, and chants of Free Palestine. And even more shockingly, the latest responses from the BBC to complaints seem to indicate that they don't in fact view this incident as an anti-Semitic episode, but rather as an anti-Israel attack.
I understand that this situation also kind of brings into focus, and I think this is what you were alluding to there at the end, another trend in what we're seeing, which has to do with the relationship between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. So in your view, is that accurate with regard to this situation? And if so, can you tell us a little bit about how that played out?
Racists in polite society will often seek to disguise their hatred of Jews by claiming to be anti-Israel or anti-Zionist. Well, Zionism is the belief of the right of the Jewish people to self-determination. So what is it to be anti that right? You can be neutral for sure, but if you are anti-Zionist, you believed that Jews don't have a right to self-determination uniquely in the world, you're making a distinction for Jews. Now, that shouldn't fool anyone, because anti-Zionism is a modern subset of anti-Semitism, and we need to be alive to this.
Thank you, Natasha, for being such a vigilant warrior against anti-Semitism, and also for your friendship to Stand With Us. I know that the Stand With Us UK staff is fully engaged there in the fight against anti-Semitism, as are you, fostering meaningful connections between individuals in Israel and making sure that the much needed education is available to students on campus, to members of the community. And so again, we just are so grateful for you, for your time today, and again, for all the work that you're doing.
It's been a pleasure. And thank you, Carly, for everything that you and everyone at Stand With Us continues to do, in particular to support students who have certainly been under siege.
Let's hear now from the director of Stand With Us Brazil, Andre Last. Andre, thank you for being with us. And I wonder if you can tell us a little bit of an update on what you're seeing in terms of anti-Semitism there in Brazil, as well as in the broader South American region.
So yeah, we deal with the old anti-Semitism, although we have partnership with many old and known institutions, the Jewish community, the CONIBI, the federations. CONIBI is the umbrella organization of the Jewish federations in Brazil. They are 70, 80 years old, and they are very known and respected, and they know how to fight anti-Semitism. Also, we help the community in education. As everyone knows, Stand With Us as an education organization, we run educational projects. So we run educational projects in Brazil, in all the 26 states that composed Brazil Federation, in schools, in universities, inside and outside the Jewish community. We have a diplomacy department that educates politicians, opinion makers, bloggers, YouTubers, famous people that can influence millions of people with their videos in YouTube. We go to them, we explain to them why it's important to talk about Israel, why it's important to talk about Jewish history, and we get a very, very positive response from them, and we are getting millions and millions of views on videos from those people that are inviting us to talk about those issues. So just in 2021, after the war, we went to 7 or 8 YouTube channels with more than 25 million followers, and we talk about that, and this is education also. And despite that, we also run the internship, the fellowship. We have now a new project called the Mastership. This is for old people like 30 plus, in order to educate people that want to be educated about Israel and about the Jewish history. We go to Jewish schools, to Jewish, to synagogues, to youth movements, to JCCs, and of course, outside the Jewish community. It's a very important work we are doing now. It's to go into campuses, universities, and of course, running programs with non-Jewish people in order to also build trust between us, build up a community of people that support Israel, even they are not Jewish, and of course, make the word to spread out. We want to give as much as more content to as much as more people, so they can also educate other people, and so on and so forth.
Wow, Andre, that is impressive work that you've described there. And we thank you so much for being with us, for giving us a little bit of a glimpse into what's happening there in Brazil. And we definitely look forward to hearing more from you as you continue this fantastic and, as you mentioned, extremely important work there in Brazil, as well as in the broader South American region.
Thank you, thank you. With the help with Stand With Us International, this is the best and the most impact organization that can fight and educate about anti-Semitism and about the Jewish people in the world. No doubt, and I'm very proud to be part of it.
We now have the privilege of being joined by United States Congressman Richie Torres to speak to the current issue of growing anti-Semitism in America. Richie, we are so grateful for your time and for you being here with us. Please tell us a little bit about what you're seeing and how anti-Semitism in the United States manifests and what the trends are right now.
So I have a longstanding concern that the extremes on the hard left could be to the Democratic Party in American politics what Jeremy Corbyn became to the Labour Party in British politics. For me, Jeremy Corbyn serves as a cautionary tale of what can happen when anti-Semitism is left unchecked, when a demagogue pumps anti-Semitic poison into the bloodstream of a nation's politics. And so I feel like here in the United States, we have to be vigilant in speaking out against anti-Semitism, no matter what form it takes, no matter what ideological direction from which it comes, whether it comes on the right or on the left. And we have to be willing to speak out against anti-Semitism in our own backyard. I've been a forceful critic of the BDS movement because I see clearly an attempt by the BDS movement, A, to delegitimize Israel, and B, to ostracize pro-Israel, progressive members of the pro-Israel Jewish community from the larger progressive movement. And so it's been a mission of mine to establish myself as a pro-Israel progressive, right? To drive home the message that there are people like me who are pro-Israel, not despite our progressive values, but because of them. I see my advocacy for Israel as a profound expression of my progressive values. The central value of progressivism is progress, and there's no greater example of progress in the Middle East than Israel. There's no country in the Middle East more protective of minority rights, women's rights, LGBTQ rights. If you go to Jerusalem, you will see the most devout Christians, Jews, and Muslims worshiping. It's a tableau of religious pluralism. Israel is one of the most innovative societies on earth. It invests about 5% of its GDP in research and development, which is by far the highest in the world. So by every metric, Israel is a profoundly progressive country and enterprise. And that's a message that has to be drawn home here in American politics, because we're living in an age of disinformation. And there's no country that is a greater target of disinformation than the state of Israel. So we have to defend it. I can tell you as a member of Congress, the work that you do is more essential than ever before. We need messengers who are fighting the relentless disinformation campaign that has been waged against the state of Israel. So thank you for everything you do.
Thank you, Congressman Torres. As you rightly emphasized, we cannot afford to let anti-Semitism go unchecked. And progress requires that we remain vigilant in countering anti-Semitism and speaking out against all forms of anti-Jewish attacks, including those aimed at the Jewish state of Israel, regardless of their source. Here in the US, Stand With Us is doing just that through our educational work with students and throughout the broader community, through our campaigns to expose anti-Semitism that has seeped into the mainstream culture, including in the corporate world, and through our active efforts, including through legal means when necessary, to address and remedy the hostile climate that so often results from anti-Semitic incidents in each of these contexts. Our relationships with our many partners here in the US, including you, Congressman, are invaluable in this fight. It is clear that the virus of anti-Semitism is continuing to infect our culture across the country and around the globe. But it is also clear that there are courageous and effective groups and individuals who are working alongside us to face this problem head on. And you, the members of our audience, are also an important part of that effort. So I want to leave you with a few things that you can do, if you haven't already, to lend further support to the fight against anti-Semitism. First, go to www.standwithus.com/IHRA to learn about the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism and add your name to the growing list of those around the world who support the adoption and the use of this consensus definition. If you see something, say something. Feel free to reach out to us at any time if you see or experience anti-Semitism or virulent anti-Israel activity. You can contact me at carlyg@standwithus.com or our legal department at legal@standwithus.com. And finally, check out our materials on anti-Semitism. We have a growing library of dozens of fantastic booklets that look at the history, the definition, the manifestations, and so many more aspects of one of the world's oldest hatreds. Join us in the fight against anti-Jewish bigotry. Thank you for joining us and for all that you are doing to support the work of Stand With Us, Israel, and the Jewish people.
Thank you, Carly, and all the incredible representatives from around the world. You know, it's disheartening to hear about all the immense hate out there, but it's also powerful and inspiring to know that we have friends like these on the ground doing the great work needed to fight and educate. At Stand With Us, we know that education is the road to peace, and one of our key goals is to ensure that the internationally recognized definition of anti-Semitism is adopted as widely as possible. To teach us more, please welcome Stand With Us Assistant Director of Campus Strategy and Research, Elisa Alul.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elisa Alul, and I am the Assistant Director of Campus Strategy here at Stand With Us. And I have the pleasure of working with our amazing students from around the world. And today, our students are working tirelessly to educate their peers about the anti-Semitism they face and how they can support the Jewish community by learning to better identify and respond to anti-Semitism when it occurs. Jewish and Zionist students understand that without a clear and concise definition of anti-Semitism, it will be difficult to identify and combat, thereby allowing it to spread unchecked. Therefore, one major way our students have been educating their peers and combating anti-Semitism on campus is by working with their schools to adopt the consensus-driven International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, IHRA, working definition of anti-Semitism. Although at times our students have faced pushback with efforts to deny their lived experiences with anti-Semitism, they have stood strong in the face of adversity, and we've been proud to support them along the way. To help them counter such pushback and successfully educate their campus communities about anti-Jewish bigotry, we have teamed up with the International Legal Forum to launch a student-facing campaign in support of the IHRA definition called Students for IHRA. With our students leading the charge, this inspiring grassroots student campaign will invite students from around the world to pledge support for the IHRA definition, spread that support for the IHRA definition far and wide online and on campus, and will provide access to a plethora of resources to help them in their efforts to educate about anti-Semitism and encourage their schools to adopt the consensus definition of anti-Semitism, the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. And I am so pleased to share that Students for IHRA launches tomorrow. So if you are a student, please join us in uniting to define anti-Semitism as a student for IHRA by signing the Unity Statement at studentsforihra.org and contributing to the social media campaign via the site's multimedia page. And if you're a member of the community, visit studentsforihra.org and follow along with our students' journeys. It all starts here with the sneak peek to the campaign launch video, which will go live tomorrow. Now, without further ado, I introduce you to Students for IHRA.
Anti-Semitism is rising around the world at a disturbing rate.
After anti-Semitic attacks in those cities, there has been a troubling rise in such incidents ever since the fighting broke out in the Middle East.
In the latest anti-Semitic attack in New York City, a recent wave of assault.
In recent years, Jews have been murdered, synagogues vandalized, and students ostracized from the social fabric on campus.
Over the past year, we saw classical anti-Semitism play out when Jews around the world were accused of causing and spreading COVID-19, reminiscent of scapegoating for the Black Plague in the medieval ages.
More recently, we saw how anti-Zionism crossed the line into anti-Semitism, when Jews were attacked in the streets of major global cities
in the name of anti-Israel activism at the height of the latest conflict between Israel and the terrorist group Hamas.
A lot of this anti-Semitism comes from misinformation about Israel, Jews, and anti-Semitism on campus, in the community, and online.
Plus, many people are so oblivious to anti-Semitism they often miss it, which allows this misinformation to spread and causes anti-Semitism to rise.
So how can we turn things around?
It all starts with education and explicitly defining anti-Semitism for what it is. We need a clear and specific definition of anti-Semitism to help us name, identify, respond to, and combat anti-Semitism, especially how it manifests today.
The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism does just that.
As Jewish students studying at universities around the world, the RHRA working definition of anti-Semitism represents our voices and lived experiences.
This definition reflects the many different forms of anti-Semitism we face across the political spectrum, empowering us to more effectively identify and respond to this hate. That is why its text is considered the gold standard
and has been adopted or endorsed by many prominent Jewish organizations, over 30 countries to date, as well as other respected institutions. Together, we are saying loud and clear, the RHRA definition speaks for us.
The IRA definition speaks for us.
The IRA definition speaks for us.
The IRA definition speaks for us.
Together, we are students for IRA, working to define anti-Semitism in the movement to eradicate it.
Does the IRA definition of anti-Semitism speak for you too? Join us by going to studentsforira.org and signing the campaign's unity statement.
Thanks, Elisa. Let's do everything we can to push this movement forward together. Now, for our last segment of this plenary, we have a very special session about defining and understanding the importance of Zionism. He's the author of 9 books, including the seminal Zionist Ideas, Moynihan's Moment, and Never Alone. In conversation with Stand With Us senior educator Charlotte Korczak, I'm thrilled to welcome Professor Gil Troy.
Hi, Gil. It's great to be with you today. So let's just dive in and really have a conversation about Zionism broadly, but also Zionism today and how we are seeing it play out in today's world. So first of all, let's just really quickly, what's Zionism? Let's define it for our audience.
To understand Zionism, you have to understand Judaism. Judaism is not just a religion. It's like an Oreo cookie. Just like the Oreo cookie has the cookie part and the cream part, and that's what makes the Oreo cookie. Zionism is a mix of peoplehood and religion. Once we accept that the Jews are a people, we then understand that the Jews have a homeland. And they also have the right, like 192 other countries in the United Nations today, to establish a state on that homeland. Am Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, Medinat Yisrael. The Jewish people, the land of Israel, and the state of Israel. And Zionism was initially the movement of national liberation to establish a state. Now it's to defend the state and to perfect the state. And there's one other dimension of Zionism today, which is so important for our Stand With Us family. It's also what I call identity Zionism. It's not just about how do we defend the state, how do we give to the state, how do we improve the state, but how does the state give us inspiration and meaning and a path forward? And that's the power of Zionism today.
Absolutely. I tend to always say to my students, they should have a very quick definition of Zionism that they could pull out of their pocket just to tell people. So my definition of modern Zionism is the belief in and support for Jewish self-determination in the historic ancestral homeland of the Jewish people. Does that work?
That works, but so many people don't get the peoplehood part.
Right.
Because we know, oh, Judaism, I'm religion.
Right.
But I said, wait a minute.
Absolutely.
Where's your kippah? Where's your kosher food? Where's your Shmirat Shabbat? And they said, well, no, but I'm just a Jew. I said, that's great. Right. And that's the beauty of Judaism, that you don't have, there's no like religious test, right? There's a religious dimension and a peoplehood dimension.
Right. Absolutely. Super important. Yeah. So what is unique about, let's jump into a different topic. What is unique about modern anti-Semitism, and where does Zionism or anti-Zionism, if you will, play a role in that kind of modern anti-Semitism?
My soul hurts. This is such a painful topic. The Zionists hoped that by establishing a Jewish state, we would eliminate anti-Semitism.
Right.
Humanists hope that after Auschwitz, after Hitler, there would be no anti-Semitism. I grew up in this world thinking, okay, the world learned its lesson. And today what we're seeing is a return of traditional Jew hatred. The hatred of the Jew who walks on the street, who dares to be different, and the hatred of the Jew who also fits in. But now there's a whole other dimension of anti-Semitism today, which is anti-Zionism. Whereas in the medieval ages, they hated the collective Jew. Now we hate the Jewish state. Okay. And too many of my colleagues, too many people in the media, the United Nations, too many of our Arab brothers and sisters, well, not all of them, focus on Israel as the center of evil. The obsession with Israel, the disproportionate focus on Israel, the demonization of Israel, these are marks of traditional anti-Semitism now transferred to the Jewish state.
So would you say that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, or is there some nuance there? Because I think this is somewhere where within the Zionist community, there's some disagreement.
Theoretically, we could sit around and say, oh, I don't believe in nationalism. But why do Jews have to be the first ones to say we're giving up on our nationalism when there are 192 countries in the United Nations that are built around nationalism?
Yeah.
We could say, oh, I don't really think that that Judaism should be so centered on peoplehood or on statehood. But the fact is that most anti-Zionists don't do that work today. Most anti-Zionists fall into the obsession, fall into the demonization, fall into the stereotypes that come straight out of the medieval playbook. And so the burden of proof isn't on us. Why are we Zionists sitting around saying, oh, can we somehow find a path for Jew haters to find something so that they can feel more comfortable? Feminists don't sit around and say, oh, how do we make it easier for sexists? Homosexuals don't sit around and say, how do we make it easier for homophobes? Blacks don't sit around saying, how do we make it easier for racists? Why do we Jews have to say, oh my goodness, they might be somehow nice? They're not.
Right.
If they really want to prove that they are critical of Israel, and there's obviously room for criticism of Israel, because in the democratic state of Israel, there's a lot of debate about what should Israel do and what should Israel not do. But today, anti-Zionism isn't focused so much on what Israel does, but what Israel is. And the burden of proof is on them, not on us. Daniel Patrick Moynihan said, everybody asks what's wrong with the accused. I say what's wrong with the accuser.
Right. I think there's an element here also when we talk about Zionism today in a lack of understanding of Jewish history, and an understanding that when people say I'm an anti-Zionist, what a Jew might hear is, well, why do you want to take away my protection in this world, right? Why do you want to relegate me back to this minority who's defenseless? And I think that's also where an element of anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism go hand in hand. It's, anti-Zionists saying, no, I'm fine with Jews as long as they're, again, defenseless and a minority in this world with no power. And I think that's another line that also needs to be drawn between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism for people who just don't understand Jewish history.
It goes back to the French revolutionaries who say, to the Jews as individuals, everything. To the Jews collectively, nothing. And why are we always the one on the chopping block? Why are we the ones who were always targeted? And that's where the burden of proof is on them, not on us.
Absolutely.
And yeah, look, intellectually, there's always room for conversation. There's always room for criticism. But what we're seeing today is a tsunami of hatred. What we're seeing today is an intensity and intensification of this. And within the Jewish community, also we see this kind of false thing of, oh, let's go back and find somebody who wasn't Zionist in the 1800s and the early 1900s. Well, since the 1940s, people learned about the Shoah, the Holocaust. And since 1948, there's a state of Israel. If you reject the state of Israel, if you reject Zionism, you're rejecting, first of all, half of the Jewish people.
Right.
And you're also rejecting this movement that, as you point out, has been the most effective movement, not just for self-protection, but for Jewish pride. And that's why Natan Sharansky, the great Soviet Jewish refusenik, and I call those Jews within the Jewish community, Jewish leaders, Jewish professors, some rabbis, who are trying to undo this core consensus that I said at the beginning about peoplehood and statehood and homeland. We call them un-Jews. They're not non-Jews. They're not ex-Jews. They're not necessarily bad Jews, but they're undoing that core consensus that since 1948, especially since 1967, has had most Jews understand that a central part of modern Judaism is the link between the religion and the peoplehood and the state,
the land, and this beautiful mix. And if it confuses people, that's on them. Every modern movement is a lovely symphony, a delightful mix of different ideas, different tensions, and let's juggle away rather than saying, oh, you have to be this or that. We have too much all or this or that in the modern world. Black and white. Yeah, not enough nuance, not enough gray. Absolutely. You recently wrote an article with Sharansky about the un-Jews, right? So if anyone wants to learn more, they can check out that article. There was also another article that you recently put out about how anti-Zionists are really affecting United States Jewry. I'd love if you could talk more about that and maybe even also expand it beyond just US Jewry. How is it affecting diaspora Jewry as a whole?
It was actually when I came back from the Stand With Us conference in Los Angeles, which was such a wonderful bubble of love and intensity and inspiration. But even in that bubble, when I spoke to so many parents, they were worried about their kids. They were worried about the hatred that was surrounding us. When I spoke on college campuses to young Jews, when I spoke to Birthright participants during the small window they were able to come here this summer, they all talked about, especially in May, feeling this intensity of hatred, this irrational singling out of Israel and the Jewish people. And of course, this big lie that somehow the fight between Israelis and Palestinians is exactly like the racial reckoning going on in the United States.
Right.
And I said, what's going on here? In Israel, no matter what goes on college campuses, we live very well. We have our issues, we have our challenges, but the attack both of the un-Jews within the Jewish community and the anti-Jews, the Bash Israel Firsters in the outside Jewish community doesn't hurt us here in Israel. Who does it hurt? It hurts Jews.
Right.
It hurts Jews on campus. It hurts their parents. It hurts Jews who just want to celebrate. And what did I say? And it's true in the United States, it's true in Canada, it's true in Australia, it's true in Europe. They're robbing us of our dreams. They're robbing us of our joy. The greatest Jewish story of the 20th century, now the 21st century, is how the Jewish people, lost, broken, oppressed, miserable for so many years, found pride, found a home, found protection. And now those haters and those self-haters are trying to rob us of our dreams. And all too often, we let them do it. We let them do it by making Israel not the source of inspiration, not the source of joy, but the source of all the problems and of all the tensions. I call it the Israel of the hunchback and the furrowed brow. Delight in Israel. Be proud of Israel. Celebrate Zionism. Embrace identity Zionism. And dream. Theodor Herzl said, if you will, it is no dream. Im tirtzu ein zo agada. And we have to go back to that and say, you're not going to steal our dreams. You're not going to take our love of Israel, of Zion, of the Jewish people, and of Judaism away from us.
Yeah, that's really important and really powerful. As an educator myself, I've experienced that a lot just in the last, 8 months since May. I think before we had a really big problem within the Jewish community of apathy, of young people just not, Israel, yeah, it's there, that's fine, but no real pride, no real passion until they really came under attack, which is sad that that's what drives them sometimes. But I definitely have experienced that shift, and I couldn't agree more. There's this fear, but I think it's also pushing people, and young people especially, more towards pride in Israel and pride in being Jewish, because there is this acceptance of, well, they're going to hate me anyway, so I might as well be me. And then there is that sad group of maybe un-Jews, but also just Jews who feel like, well, if I let go of this one thing, Zionism, then I'll be accepted in these circles. And I think that is something we could talk about as well, of just something historical that Jews have always experienced, this notion of if there's one thing that you let go of as a Jew, you won't face anti-Semitism anymore.
So first of all, I do think that the Jewish establishment is not giving our young people, our students, enough credit. I do feel that on the college campuses, and we're seeing this to Stand With Us and so many other places, we're seeing it in the United States, we're seeing it throughout the world, there are more and more young Jews who are saying, hey, wait a minute, Don't push me around. And wait a minute, I saw in May that this wasn't about what Israel does, but what Israel is. I saw how irrational it was. And I want to be woke. I want to be on the front lines in the fight for racial justice, but I can be a Zionist and a proud Jew and also do that. And yeah, unfortunately, it sits on a long history. Look, we, unfortunately, for all the pride that I have in our history and for all the wonders that we have in Jewish history, and we should never let, again, the haters just define us, there is also this long pedigree of Jew hatred, of anti-Semitism. And we've seen again and again that bargaining. I want to be the good Jew. If I only give up on this, if I only shave my beard, if I only take off my kippah, if I only stand straight, if I only look like them or act like them, then maybe they'll like me. Maybe I'll be nice enough for them.
Right.
And you know what? It doesn't work. When you sell your soul to the devil rejoices. And so the message has to be, I'm not a Jew, and I'm not a Zionist because of them. And I'm not a Jew, and I'm not a Zionist despite them. I'm a Jew, and I'm a Zionist because this is who I am, this is who I want to be, and this is the greatest gift my parents and grandparents and great-grandparents gave me. I feel so lucky that I fell into this. And I embrace those people who actually chose it, right? And those of us who are Jewish today are all Jews by choice because it's so easy to fit in. It's so easy to assimilate. And so all of us together, those who converted and those who were born into this wonderful covenant, this wonderful story, have to stand up, stand with us, sing a song of Zion and sing a song of pride and stop apologizing and stop negotiating with them and start celebrating us.
Absolutely. As the daughter of two converts, that rings very true for me. I thank God every day that my parents chose this for me and I was born into it, and I feel very blessed. I went out and bought my Jewish star this summer very intentionally to show that pride and to wear it on my sleeve. And I hope more students are inspired to do that these days as well. What do you think is the secret of Zionism's success? I mean, here we are, this people who, we're from this land. This is our ancestral homeland. And we were sent into exile. We spent, 2,500 years in exile around the world, suffering horrific persecution and oppression, and then managed to somehow create this amazing movement that allowed us to return home and reestablish our sovereignty. And correct me if I'm wrong as a historian, but I don't think anyone else, any other people has ever managed to do something like that. So what's the secret to Zionism's success in the 20th century?
Golda Meir liked to say, what's the secret to our success? In brera. We had no choice.
Right.
Our backs were against the wall.
Yeah.
And that's half of it, right? But we have to be so careful not to make Zionism just anti-Semitism or today anti-Zionism. I think the secret to Zionist success was the secret of Jewish success. That we're not, as I was saying, all or nothing. We're this mix. We're this mix of this nation and religion. We're a mix of a global people, a diasporic people, and also people with a very strong sense of homeland. And we're a mix of what Natan Sharansky calls people searching for identity and searching for freedom. Today in the modern world, we have extremists who say, oh, I'm a liberal and I can't be a nationalist. We have nationalists who say, oh, I'm all about raising walls and not opening hearts. And if you go back to Sinai, go back to the Torah, and go back to the core of the Zionist movement. What's it about? It's about a mix. It's saying, no, I'm really proud of my people. I'm really proud of who I am. And by learning our story and learning our values and learning who we are, it doesn't make me put up more walls. It makes me open my heart. And it makes me proud of myself, but also able to do tikkun olam, true tikkun olam, fixing the universe, because we have an Israeli army that not only defends Israel and the Jewish people, but also goes to Surfside and helps save people who in the collapse. It goes to Haiti when there's an earthquake. And what are they doing? They're living out Jewish values, but they're showing that Jewish nationalism isn't only about me, but it's about me, and us. And that's liberal nationalism, that's Zionism, that's the secret of our success. That mix, that balance.
Amazing. So hopefully Stand With Us is part of that journey, right? Part of the journey of teaching that story and teaching that pride. And that's what we try to do every day. And, we love having you. We use you as much as we can to try to instill that pride in the next generation, because there's nothing like your words. And I'm really, really, truly honored that I was able to sit down with you and have this conversation. So thank you so much. Thank you for all your hard work. I do want to say to our audience that your books have changed my life, and everyone should pick up a book by Gil Troy, whether it's Moynihan's Moment, one that today is still so incredibly historically relevant, or the Zionist ideas, which every person should have sitting on their coffee table for their young people, for their children to pick up and just read a little bit of these excerpts from these brilliant Zionists throughout history. So I want to thank you so much. Thank you for all the work that you've done with Stand With Us. And we just hope that the relationship will continue and grow stronger. So thank you so much, Gil. It was a pleasure.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be part of the Stand With Us family.
Thank you so much, Professor Troy and Charlotte, for that insightful discussion. Please check your schedules for your next sessions, and I'll see you at the closing plenary in a little while. I hope you have a meaningful day filled with education and inspiration. Enjoy.